Hi.
Hi,
How's
everybody.
it going?
Welcome. I have Jason Charles Miller here today because we were like, well, I mean, you've been traveling and working like the very busy, wonderful, successful human that you are.
Thank you.
And yeah, we were talking. We were like, when can we get together and discuss how we feel about Rings of Power? So today is that day. But our plan was kind of, now that we've had some time to sit with Rings of Power, to really talk about how we're feeling about it and kind of go through episode by episode, what maybe worked for us, what didn't work for us. So, Jason, I will ask you to kind of kick it off with things like how you're feeling now that you've sat with it for a month.
Right. So it was interesting. I was, here, I'm going to get comfortable here.
Get comfortable.
All right.
Yeah.
I was at a gathering last week and someone had not seen it yet.
Ooh,
but
okay.
they knew that I was a Tolkien, enthusiast.
Mm-hmm. Super fan.
Yeah. And they asked me what I thought of it. And I actually, to encapsulate it, here's what I said. I said, I wanted to love it, but I ended up liking it. Okay? That's
okay.
Now, there's a lot of things about it that I did love. There's a lot of things about it I didn't love.
Yeah.
But overall, I did end up liking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I probably am sitting in the same place as you. The line that I've been giving people when they ask me about it is, I feel very similar to it the way that I felt watching the Hobbit films.
Right.
Where I wanted to absolutely love everything about them start to finish, but there were things within the Hobbit films that I absolutely cherish and enjoy and have prop replicas of in my house to this day.
Sure.
And there were things in the Hobbit films that really didn't work for me, specific storytelling things. The fact that they really focused on the Battle of the Five Armies instead of the back again portion of the journey. Like I had my qualms.
Right.
You know what I mean?
They made a whole movie about the battle.
Which that movie, was originally supposed to be titled There and Back Again. And then after some market research, they changed it to Battle of Five Armies. Which, you know what? All of the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings original trilogy fans that wanted big old medieval battles, Battle of Five Armies is a better title to get those people in. For me, who's read The Hobbit about a bajillion times, There and Back Again was 100% the title for me. But, I understand why decisions were made. It doesn't mean I can't still be a little sassy about it.
Sure.
But so with Rings of Power, I feel very much the same way. There are some things they did cinematically with that series that will forever live in my heart as, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Can I please get a prop replica of that? I absolutely loved X, Y, and Z. But there are also some things within the series that I feel like didn't hit for me as much as I wanted them to. Like you said, you wanted to love it. You ended up liking it. Yeah. I feel like that's where I have settled with it as well. And I also feel like I am giving that season 1 a ton of leeway, knowing that we're having 5 seasons.
Right.
Like this season to me on its own, I don't believe stands very well on its own. I'm giving it a lot of, well, we'll see where they're going with this.
It's a lot of setup,
It's a lot of setup. We put a lot of chess pieces into play. When I look back at it, I feel like some of the things that I love about Tolkien storytelling, right, is that characters are able to go on a big adventure. Like, we're with them for the journey, right? And with Rings of Power, I don't really feel like there was any journey to be with them on yet. I hope that's where they're going. Yeah. I feel like it was a lot of, and now let's check in here, and now let's check in here, and these people have suddenly moved here, and now these people are over here. And right. I want to be told an epic tale, and at least I feel like with season 1 so far, it was much more of a Clue style, hidden identity, guess the mystery, than like a follow along on this epic adventure. That's my feeling on it, just looking at season 1. Standalone, I feel like is a little tough.
Yeah. And also, I give them leeway also for the fact that, from what I understand, for the years that they worked on it, they were always under the impression that the show was going to be released all at once. All 8 episodes were going to be released at once. And then about 6 months before that, some word came down from some executive in some office somewhere that said, you know what, we want you to release them once a week. And they had already filmed it. It was done. They were doing, visual effects at that point. And I'm curious to know, I want to talk to people who do binge it because then, look, we were like waiting, like, who's the stranger? Who's Sauron? This is so annoying. I might have texted you after like the 3rd episode, and I'm like, if they don't tell me who the stranger is, I'm gonna throw something at my TV.
Right.
You know, but if you were binging it, that might have, your brain might have looked at it a little bit differently. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's a really, really good point to look at it from, you know, the actual making of the television show perspective, which you and I have done a lot in like our teaser breakdowns and trailer breakdowns, talking about what they actually have the rights to, and how, while fan theory wise we would love to see, you know, the Halcaraxi, for example, probably aren't going to go there because of the limitations that they have in place just from the back end production standpoint and rights, etc., etc. Megastat says, I binged it, kind of. Took me 2 tries to finish the first episode, but when I managed to power through in total, it was okay. All right. I feel like it would benefit, again, you know, I feel like it would benefit from having season 2 to help us kind of complete some of the stuff in season 1.
Yeah.
So that season 1 feels a little bit more like a complete thing, especially since we have to wait like 2 years.
I know.
For more of the series. So I liked it enough that I am definitely excited for season 2. You know, like when people are like, out of a 10, what would you give it? I think this far out, I'm probably sitting at like a 7.5 or 8 out of 10.
Okay.
So like, I did really like it. I wanted to like 11 out of 10 it.
Right.
You know? And Red Banshee says, I'm honestly surprised at all the negative press. I really enjoyed it. I mean, there are some things that and Red Banshee continues maybe because I'm not a Tolkien fanatic or something. And Jason, have you seen people that didn't go into this with a working knowledge of Tolkien lore like it, you know, receive it better? I think they liked it a little bit more. They like it a little bit better?
They liked it a little bit more. I think everyone complained that it was a little slow. And I would have to agree.
Because it's all set up. It's all set up.
Yeah. I feel like ultimately they did set out what they meant to do, which was bring Tolkien to a wider audience.
That's true. And that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. One of my pet peeves, not about the show, but about people who haven't seen it yet, they're like, oh, the Silmarillion show. I'm like, no, it's not the Silmarillion show at all. But, you know, I get it. Because if you're a casual Tolkien fan, you know about Lord of the Rings, you know about The Hobbit, you've heard of the Silmarillion, but you haven't read it.
Yeah.
And so people think it's a show about the Silmarillion stories, and it's not.
Well, I get asked a lot, like, what book can I read before I watch Rings of Power? And it's like, there's not really one good place to point you to.
Because it's based off a really small piece of history that Tolkien wrote about, but gave very broad strokes. Yeah. Like in 1743, so-and-so was king. And then in 1759, so-and-so was king.
Right.
You know, and then it was up to the showrunners to fill in the blanks.
Right, exactly. And so I love that. I love that we're getting these stories told that we haven't really had before. And I love for the showrunners and the show writers, you know, that they have this freedom to explore that world. Which is why I would say probably another one of my nitpicks, now that I've sat with it a bit, I'm a little bummed at the reveal of who the stranger is. Because there's so much untold story in Second Age. Why are we defaulting to characters we already know a ton about? Yeah. Like, to me, as a fan, I wanted to see. Now, granted, they haven't officially said who the stranger is, but
he sure said a lot of things.
Sure said a lot of things that point us to this gentleman on my shirt right here.
Right.
Which I was hoping that wasn't going to be the reveal. And I think this is probably also an issue having to do with a weekly episodic release, is when you drop episodes weekly, you get way more fan theory discussion. Because everyone, while they're waiting week to week, is trying to piece together the puzzle, right?
Right.
And so sometimes you really fall in love with a fan theory, and then when the actual, you know, what is being told in the story is so much more simple and so much more the obvious choice, it feels a little bit of a letdown. But that is unfair to writers in general to expect them to compete with the hive mind that is the internet. Mm-hmm. And I remember having a lot of this discussion with the original Game of Thrones series when that came out. The hive mind internet comes up with really cool stuff, and then we fall in love with it to the detriment of the show.
Yeah, Odyssey Dave hopes that it's Sauron. Which, here's the thing. Yes, the stranger... Can we be spoilery? Because it's been out for a month.
Spoilers! Yeah. Rings of Power spoilers.
So, yes, he said a lot of Gandalf-y things, right?
Yes.
Including almost note for note, especially the always follow your nose thing.
Yes, and he's obsessed with moths and the Harfoots and...
Yeah. But the Blue Wizards, according to the books, the Blue Wizards were the two that showed up in the Second Age. Gandalf didn't really show up till the third. They said they're compressing timelines, so,
I'm so hopeful it's a Blue Wizard.
Now, the Blue Wizards do go east, and that's where they're going.
Yep.
They're going to Rune, so that's
what Dante just said.
A Blue Wizard.
Mm-hmm. I would love to see it be a Blue Wizard. I also just want to know more about the Blue Wizards. Like, tell me that story.
Right.
I already know a lot about Gandalf's story. However... And I'm hoping this is not the reason they chose to go there. If they did, I understand it from a production and marketing standpoint. But I feel the same way much about calling Battle of Five Armies, and not there and back again. More casual Tolkien fans that watched episode 1, because I got to see episode 1 at a lot of different press screenings.
Oh, right.
A lot of people that, were more casual Tolkien fans right away were like, oh, that's Gandalf. I hope that's Gandalf. After episode 1.
Oh, wow.
And they were super stoked to see that be Gandalf.
Okay.
And for me, I was like, well, Gandalf's not the only Astari, and, but that's my hopes and dreams. But if they are trying to make this for as wide of an audience as possible, kind of predicting that might be the reaction from people that know the Peter Jackson films and are excited to see characters they're already familiar with, mayhaps that was the reason for that choice. Now, we don't know. Officially, we don't know, but it certainly seems like they're they're broadcasting that it is Gandalf.
And the entire time that everyone thought Halbrand was Sauron, and we're like, no, he's gonna be this, he's gonna be that, he's gonna be this,
so hoping Halbrand wasn't Sauron.
He was, and we're like, oh, of course he was, because all those little hints that I thought were red herrings, right?
I know, me too.
Were just hints. They were just straight up hints to the more casual viewer.
Yeah.
Like, look, he's really into smithing, and I'm like, nah, they're just doing that to try to mess with our brains, or he's whispering something to Pharazôn, because that's implied later in one of the books. And I'm like, no, they're just messing with us. He's whispering something to Galadriel. No, they're messing with us. And then they weren't messing with us at all.
And the second that Halbrand's like, consider it a gift, and hands it over, we all went, ah. But Red Banshee said it a little earlier in here that the Halbrand reveal, the Sauron reveal, was awesome. This image will forever live in my mind as something that I absolutely love and would have like a framed oil painting in my house. I loved this shot. I thought it was so cool and so well done and inspired so many thoughts and hopes and dreams in me. So even though like you're hearing me be a little nitpicky about, fan theories I'd hoped were coming true, things I had hoped were red herrings, I do think the actual execution of the reveal was well done.
Blink and you missed it, but his eyes went into slits.
Yeah.
Right before this shot.
Yeah.
Much like the eye that we saw in the Peter Jackson films on the top of the Tower of Barad-dûr. So it everything with it, I thought was...
Well, and again, if you don't know that Sauron is a shapeshifter and takes the form of Anatar, the gift giver, that considered a gift may have meant nothing to you.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I do appreciate that they threw those things in there for people who are more familiar with the greater world at large, to pick up on. And I do really think they tried. So this is where I get also a little defensive for people who criticize the show as like having nothing to do with the lore. They don't care about the lore. I would wildly disagree with that. I think they do really care about the lore, and I think they're really trying to take the hardcore Tolkien fans to heart by putting in a lot of these things. I don't know that all of their intentions landed quite the way they wanted to, I guess.
Yeah. And, look, I have no doubt that they are huge fans of the lore, and I think that they just took it in a direction that maybe you and I wouldn't have, but that's their own interpretation of where they wanted to take it.
Yes. Yes. Junior Daxpo says that shot we were talking about earlier, kind of feel like this shot could be classified as the first temptation of Galadriel. And the last one is maybe the moment when Frodo offers the ring to her. Like, I honestly, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Eric says the thing I noticed about this shot is she's truly portrayed as his equal in the reflection, both terrifying and powerful, not one over the other. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Eric. Absolutely. Like I said, this shot in particular inspired so much thought in me and got me very excited for where the future of the series is going, because she does look powerful. And in this shot, I feel like, you know, this is kind of him trying to get her to envision how they could rule together and what that future would look like for Middle Earth if they did become all powerful together as equals. And I'm like, ooh, I love it.
And in the story so far, in the TV show, she believes that her husband is dead. So
yes, yeah. So she did make it sound like he was lost in the war. She may have even said he was lost in the war. Which, I mean, there's no way they can. Like he has to be alive.
Yeah, he has to be alive.
He has to be alive.
You know, but behind the scenes, the Tolkien estate made the showrunners agree that they wouldn't kill anyone that wasn't already dead. They wouldn't kill characters that were still alive in the book. So that means that Celeborn is alive.
Okay.
So I think he's going to be in season 2 for sure.
I mean, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Then what is that, you know, rekindling going to look like? And
how are they going to explain it? That's the big thing.
How are they going to explain it?
Because elves have this sort of magical connection to each other.
Right.
And it seems as if elves know if someone's alive or dead. So she thinks he's dead. So how are they going to explain that to us? Is he going to be in this weird chamber, imprisoned with, like, you know, anti-elf magic, RF shielding or something? Like,
I don't know. Well, I mean, I feel like so much of what they've already changed about kind of what we have come to know about elven lore in terms of Valinor, etc. Maybe they'll just throw that out the window and it won't be a discussion point. But I hope you're right. I hope that they
find an explanation.
Find an explanation for it. Speaking of finding an explanation, Fox UK said, I wish they had made it that he had forgotten he was Sauron or under some kind of spell, instead of making out that it was him, that it was all a grand plan, because there were so many things that happened that should have been completely coincidental.
Right.
I agree. And those are the things that I feel like maybe the showrunners underestimated the nitpicky fans and like how much we're gonna go into that.
Because even the way they met on the ocean when he's on the raft, I would have loved actually for Halbrand to be like, I planned that too. I planned it all.
Right.
But and maybe he did, and maybe we'll learn more about that in season 2. But he didn't say that this time. He did not.
No, and we'll see.
There's another theory, though, and I believe Nerd of the Rings, I haven't watched the video yet, but Nerd of the Rings delved into, and also the Tolkien professor mentioned this, that what if Halbrand was Halbrand until a certain point in the show, and then Sauron disguised, and Halbrand died in episode 7, and then Sauron disguised himself as Halbrand at that moment.
Oh, that would be interesting. Yeah. I had not even thought about that. That would be interesting. I did see an interesting Halbrand, Sauron kind of character study that people were doing about early Halbrand, right? Where maybe he was on the raft legitimately not wanting to be the Dark Lord anymore. Because he says a lot of things to Galadriel about, you know, no one could forgive his past, and he's just trying to leave all that behind. And maybe that was genuine to some degree, which might explain his actions. But then also, man, isn't that a guilt wallop for Galadriel that, like, he was actually done. He had thrown in the towel until you, ma'am, convinced him to come back. Woof, what a gut punch, right?
Yeah.
If that's where they're going. But I did see, I think it was Dante Bogdan said earlier that the one thing you can't forgive about the series, looking back on it, is when Galadriel jumped off the boat into the ocean with no land to be seen for apparently thousands of miles. Yeah. And that was definitely a hard moment for me to swallow as well. I mean, they don't have eternal stamina.
Right. they can die.
They can die.
I mean,
and
they're
like, if
immortal,
you can't
but they
see
can be slain.
In any direction, any kind of land or anything, you're just like, eeny, meeny, miny that way. And then, I guess she could see based on the sun is, or based on which direction they were sailing to Valinor, which direction would have been which. I guess you would know that. But still, I mean, maybe she paid really solid attention on the boat and was like, okay, look, back this many miles. We passed some shipwreck stuff. I could probably make it to that. Maybe.
That could be it. Or maybe when the way to Valinor was revealed, maybe the showrunners were conceiving that sort of those clouds that opened up, maybe those opened up at the beginning, like towards the beginning, and then the clouds open up, and then they're sort of on another part of the Sundering Seas that just takes them to Valinor. I don't know.
We don't know.
But a lot of people, the internet went after that one for sure.
Yeah, that was really. Maybe, and maybe as we go through the episode by episode breakdown, I'll feel differently. But looking back on the whole season, that was my only knee-jerk reaction. Or no, I guess there were more, but that was my big knee-jerk reaction of, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That I hoped, maybe this will be explained. But if there is the coincidence that that's how Galadriel and Halbrand eventually meet, I'm kind of okay with the coincidental meeting. That doesn't bother me as much as I know that it has bothered some other people. Let's see. Junior Daxpo says, going off of the Sauron kind of takes over Halbrand theory, what if Halbrand was captured by Sauron and Sauron takes his form? Eventually Halbrand escapes and at some point returns as king. He's later gifted one of the 9 rings and ultimately becomes the Witch King of Angmar. Man, that would be wild, but I'd be into it.
Now, I think Theo is going to become the king under the mountain that betrayed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they're going to the Pelargir, which is close to where that kingdom was. So that it could turn out they were the Oathbreakers.
Yeah, it could be.
The way they've set up the time, so Elendil and Isildur are going to be setting up Gondor and Arnor in this lifetime. Theo's younger than them, so he could start to lead those people and then become the Oathbreakers, or he could become the Witch King.
I was on the Theo as the Witch King of Angmar train for a very long time. Still am.
He also, his name's Theo Den. He could be one of the first Rohirrim. He could be one of the first Rohirrim.
That is true.
Yeah, because Rohan hasn't been established yet.
Yep, and with where you mentioned Isildur, with where they left off his storyline, people who don't know the greater Tolkien world at large, that we've been talking to, have been like, oh, well, do you think he's dead? And Jason and I are like, okay, well, he's definitely not, though. No,
he's definitely not. Have you seen the first 5 minutes of
Fellowship?
Yeah,
so he's not. We know that he has to survive, but it is interesting to me for people who might be watching, not being familiar with the greater story at large, that's a legitimate question. And I hope what they're doing with that storyline is, I hope that since Isildur has been separate from everybody else who kind of got the big Sauron reveal, I hope that we see Halbrand find Isildur out in the who knows where in their own storyline in the future and start working that angle. Since Isildur doesn't know yet. I was like, that could be an interesting season 2 storyline.
Interesting. And that puts like a weird thing in Isildur's head, to where when he gets the One Ring years later, that's what makes him keep it.
One of the other questions that I know people had, as far as why are people believing Halbrand so much so? Like, even after the elves find out that it was Sauron, why do they continue going on with his plan?
Yeah, I don't know. And so what I'm curious about is, okay, when in the books, Anatar is the one that sort of was working with Celebrimbor for 300 years in disguise. They've obviously smushed that down a lot.
Yes, they have.
But at least on the show, he hasn't made the 9 rings for men.
Oh, they completely changed the order of how the rings are formed.
So is Halbrand going to come back, and is he going to be under the form of Anatar? Like, obviously, the show's called Rings of Power. So if they don't show us those other Rings of Power, like, what's up? They got to show us those.
Well, we have 4 more seasons for them to figure that part out.
Yeah, I
for
guess
sure.
So. Yeah.
I just, looking back on it, I feel like the fact that they have a grand plan of we're starting here and we want to get up to the prologue that you see at the beginning of the Fellowship, maybe they just had too much to accomplish in 5 seasons, and that's why we see a lot of stuff being rushed, because, I mean, that's really my main gripe with it, is that we're not getting to see these characters go on any kind of journey. We're getting like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and like little snippets that just kind of look like we're putting chess pieces on the board where they go. Now, I'm hoping that's just because season 1 is setting up the pieces. Yeah. Maybe if you didn't have a 5-season limitation, we could have spent more time getting a story to tell us that those pieces are set up there, instead of just a very quick, like, pieces are set up.
To go on with that, you're right. It's harder to see, they have Galadriel, someone called her Galangriel, because she's so angry. She definitely
feels that way in season 1.
And it's harder to see where she's going to become the more serene Galadriel that we know so well in all of the books and movies, but books especially. It's harder to see how that journey is going to happen if we're just getting all these flashes. Mm-hmm. Whereas, like, I feel with Elrond, they're doing a better job showing him sort of coming into himself.
I agree.
With becoming this sort of statesman.
Yeah.
And although they call him a politician on the show, which I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess that's for modern audiences. I get it.
He was a herald, right?
Yeah. And so it's interesting to see how they're going to try to fix that in a way, especially with Galadriel.
It's tough because, like I said, I know they're getting through so much, but if we had maybe seen some of the storyline with Fenrir's death, instead of just like, oh, I'm over body, take dagger, angry.
Right.
Then maybe we would understand, maybe that anger would be justified a little bit more. We never got to see that, so we just have to take it at face value that this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And be okay with it. Just like in the opening scene in the Frostwaith, is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. Forwardwaith.
Forwardwaith, thank you.
And it's Fingon, right? Her brother's Fingon?
Yes,
okay.
I always say Fenrir.
Yeah,
I always, because I think about werewolves. It's a problem. But yes, Finrod. Finrod is her brother. But yeah, in that opening scene, we just have to take it at face value that she's the leader of the army and she's a super excellent combatant. Which I'm like, okay, this is the page 1 we're starting at. But in that same page 1, it was also real angry.
Yeah.
So it's just this is our starting point, and I don't feel like she has at least had the opportunity to move very far from that starting point. And that's the whole 5-season journey. So again, I just have to give it to, we have 4 more seasons. I'm going to hold off on, having like a definite opinion one way or the other about that. But I agree with you. I do feel like we're seeing Elrond really struggle with some choices. Does he stand up with his, for his friend? Does he believe his friend? Or does he follow Gil-galad? What should he be doing? He doesn't really know. And he's kind of dealing with the ramifications of which way he decides to go. Bonsai Badger says it'll be interesting next season when those few that watch the show realize that Amazon will pretend this season never happened. We'll see. I am trying to really give season 1 the benefit of the doubt in that it's setting up the full 5-season story. Mm-hmm. And like I said, there were parts of it that I thought they did really well. Khazad-dûm was amazing.
Well, let's look, like the production design, I give a 10.
For sure.
Production design a 10, the costumes, the makeup, 10, across the board. Actually, going with his point, I don't think they ever would. Would you be upset if they said, you know what, yeah, we are going to reboot this. Let's try it again.
I don't think they'll reboot it. I think
they won't, but would you be upset? Or would you be like...
I kind of would be upset because, I do think that was the most beautiful portrayal of dwarven at the height of their successful empire. Like, that's the most beautiful we've ever seen, and to have that juxtaposition to the Mines of Moria, how we see them in the Peter Jackson films, like, that was awesome. Khazad-dûm looked incredible. I think that that both Dorans in the series are doing a fantastic job, and I love being able to see kind of that struggle for power and how the power works within Khazad-dûm, even though it's a little different than we know. I mean, Durin was not an inherited title, so that's not exactly how that was, but condensing timelines.
But both Durins are great.
Both Durins are great.
Deesa's great.
Their relationship is great. Being able to see the dynamics of, what dwarven daily family life looks like is great. Elrond and Durin's relationship, I feel like there have been some really beautiful moments between the two of them, really highlighting the differences between, elven culture and dwarven culture, and how, like that conversation they have about, it's like a blink of an eye for you, but it's a whole lifetime for me.
Right.
Like some of those moments I feel like were very beautifully done. And I would be really sad if they said we're just going to trash the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we'd lose those moments. We'd lose that cinematic shot that I showed earlier from the
Maybe
Halbrand
they take
reveal.
that and put it in season 2.
They poured some of it over. No, I mean, I think season 1 was season 1, and I'm hopeful that we go on and get a little bit more of the journey in seasons 2 through 5.
Yeah, and we haven't really talked about the Harfoots at all.
No, well, and do you...
they did my man Sadok wrong!
They did Sadok
wrong. In fact, I was so bummed that they killed him. I'm like, come on! He was great! But yeah, we haven't talked about the Harfoots a lot, and I think that was a lot of people weren't really jazzed about the Harfoot stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, I if I were to live in the Tolkien verse, I'm a hobbit. It's true.
Right.
It's where I most identify. And I didn't super resonate with the Harfoots, which obviously, I mean, Harfoot is a much more early look at what will eventually, the proto-hobbits, yes, will eventually come to be known as the hobbits in the Third Age. I don't know why. It didn't click with me.
Yeah.
The way that kind of just the joy and the simpleness and the beauty of the Shire so resonates with people. I think one of the reasons that probably we're not talking a lot about the Harfoots is they're not really instrumental to the story so far. Maybe this is it. Maybe the reason that I love the Shire so much is because we get to see such a dramatic character journey in Bilbo, in Frodo, from going from this place of comfort to leaving your zone of comfort, going on this epic adventure to the point where the fate of the world is at stake adventure, and then returning back to the safe, comfortable home at the end. And because, I mean, there's not really much at stake for the Harfoots right now. Like, yes, their fruit trees have been burned down.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing. They never really explain to us as the viewer why they have to move. Like, they're always moving,
they
right?
Just move,
they're like,
but
we have to
why.
move here, and we got to move here because of this season, and we're going to move back there because of that season. And I guess, but, like, why not settle down? Someone on the internet somewhere said that the reason that the Hobbits' doors are round is because that's the wheels from their old carriages.
Oh,
and I thought that was pretty cool.
Please steal that, show writers, because that's wonderful. I'm going to just weigh in on some of what you guys are saying. 16-Bit Eric says, all in all, when one media jumps another media, there's always a change and update. But all in all, I loved Rings of Power despite its flaws, and I'm hungry for more. I love seeing our mythologies evolve, get explored, and interpreted. And that's how I feel about almost all fandom media. I like to joke around that on the American Idol panel, I am the Paula Abdul. I will find something to love about everything that has to do with fandoms that I love. Mr. New York to Cali says, they made interesting decisions overall, but they used the Harfoots more as a way to set up world lore versus telling their story. Like, they went into more detail with Durin's story. And I would agree with that, Mr. New York to Cali. I think that's how I feel about it.
The reason why I thought they did Sadok so wrong, though, too, is because you had just established that the stranger could heal all these trees, right? So these trees that are all burned down. Yeah. He touches them. A couple hours later, they're bursting with fruit. So, wouldn't it be great if there was a wizard with healing powers sitting right next to you? Like, so showrunners, if you're gonna show me that, and then at least maybe show the stranger trying to heal Sadok and it doesn't work. But, like, give me something. Not just, like, I'm going to watch the sun rise and then die. That just really bummed me out. It was an epic death. It was cool. Yeah. He was just my favorite Harfoot, so I'm bummed that
That's sad.
Honey Henry's In fact, I texted a friend of mine that knows a little bit behind the scenes stuff, and I was like, I thought Lenny Henry signed for 5 seasons. And then he wrote back, I guess he didn't. I was like, oh, bummer.
Fate Photo says the Shire represents that peaceful existence that we all would like to have. The others are an immediate, constant struggle that was not clearly defined. And yeah, I think that's absolutely it. But Red Banshee brings up a great point about not really having the opportunity to have that peaceful type settlement until all of this mess in the Second Age is settled and we reach the peace of the Third Age. Mm-hmm. So, super true. So it all makes sense. Or at least a lot of it makes sense, when we sit here and talk about it. And this is why I love having these discussions with you, Jason, and, with everybody else on the internet that is, in general, a Tolkien fan and is kind of approaching this from, I really want this, I want to love this, right?
Right.
That's why it's fun to have these conversations. We talked about the Harfoots. We touched a little bit on our dwarves. We talked a little bit about our elves. How are you feeling about the Southlanders in general?
First of all, are they even alive other than the ones that are migrating? So like over 50% of them have been killed. Then the rest of them are migrating to the Pelargir area, which was they said an old Numenorian settlement, an abandoned Numenorian settlement. I think that they're going to be in such close proximity with Sauron that they're going to be corrupted by him. That's my theory. And
with your Theoden
well,
theory.
we'll see. Are they going to become the horse riders? We shall see. But remember, Theo also said that he loved that power of the key when he had the sword that was the key, that he almost like longed for it.
Yes.
So does that mean that he's going to be corruptible later?
Oh, I think so.
And what's going to happen with my man Adar? Because as some of you may know, because we've discussed it, so Adar is my favorite character from the show.
The whole show, Adar is your favorite character.
And he's not even in the books at all, other than he represents First Age elves who were corrupted and turned into orcs. And I think that's super fascinating.
That is super fascinating. And I love that they went into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's my favorite scene of the whole show is in episode 6 when Galadriel is interrogating him and Joseph Maui plays Adar, and his acting is superb in this whole show. And, when he says things like, Your search for Morgoth's successor should have ended in your own mirror. I'm like, they just give him such good lines, just stuff to chew on. Yeah. So I'm really interested to see how Adar and Sauron conflict. Yes. Obviously, he killed Sauron once already, or so he thought. He killed his physical form, and now he's back as Halbrand. But what about his children, his orcs? Are his orcs going to battle Sauron's orcs? Is Sauron going to make new orcs? Like, is there going to be a whole battle between the two
that would be interesting.
Mordor factions?
Yeah, that would be fascinating if they went that route.
I'm in for that. I'm in for all that.
I agree with you. Adar was absolutely fantastic. I love that they delved into, how the orcs came to be and Adar's backstory. Although I did hear, this was an interesting critique, I did hear some people critiquing that they went into that because Tolkien's at its heart doesn't give a lot of moral gray. It's very, this is the light side, this is the dark side. And the way that they portrayed Adar's story, you kind of felt bad for him.
You did. You absolutely did.
So some people were like, this feels very anti-Tolkien, but with modern fantasy storytelling and the way that we are currently and right now, what a lot of high fantasy fans are looking for is that moral gray. And you can argue that it's because of things like Game of Thrones that have popularized that and made audiences hungry for that. And I am also one of the audiences that is hungry for that. I love examining the moral gray. But does that feel inherently anti-Tolkien? I don't know. It was just an interesting critique that I read that I don't know how I feel about.
Not necessarily, because even within the factions that Tolkien wrote about, like if you think about Gondor and you think about Denethor and his 2 sons and how Boromir's hubris basically brought about his own destruction.
Right.
And Faramir, who ultimately was sort of the more noble of the 2 sons, and his faith sort of is what saved him, right? I think there's a lot of gray area in that, you know? So just even within these factors that are supposed to be good, the good guys, they can be corrupted too. So I think there was a lot of gray area in Tolkien's writing. I think what he didn't do, though, is he didn't keep things a mystery the way the showrunners were keeping things a mystery in this show.
Yeah.
And that, a lot of people have argued, is very anti-Tolkien. And Tolkien was like, no, here are the good guys, here are the bad guys, boom, there they go. But
the only mystery one could argue is Tom Bombadil.
Right.
Which we know is inherently good. It's not a mystery if he's good or evil. It's just
who is he? What is he? What's he doing?
We don't know. That's the great mystery. Tolkien.
I really hope that we get to see him somewhere.
Please. It is one of those things that I'm like, someday before I die, please let me see a screen adaptation of Bombadil. And I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I'm like,
no.
Please. It would make me so happy in my heart of hearts. I see a lot of people in chat discussing Galadriel and others surviving the volcanic explosion.
Sure. Yeah.
As a thing that seemed a little out of place.
There's also been a huge discussion online on would what they did actually make that volcanic explosion happen. And there needed to be some scientific factors involved in that. A lot of people say, yes, that would happen by basically you pour all that water into an active volcano. As long as the active volcano is capped, which it was, the steam that's being created from the water pouring into the lava would create a giant explosion.
Okay.
But you're right. Nobody would friggin' survive. That's for darn sure. So Galadriel just standing there looking at it and the episode ends.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I tried to give that to, I don't know how far they were from the explosion. Maybe they were far enough away.
Well, and there's also elf magic, right?
Also
like you can
magic.
You can always just be like, because magic can always be the story to everything.
All right. Do you have any kind of any more overriding thoughts, or should we go through episode by episode?
No, I think I pretty much, I'd love to dive into each episode and just do like a quick recap of each one and how we were feeling at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Because I do feel like for all of us, some episodes ring more true than others. Yeah. So, Season 1, Episode 1, A Shadow of the Past. Galadriel's disturbed by signs of an ancient evil's return. Arondir makes an unsettling discovery. Elrond is presented with an intriguing new venture. These are all so big. And Nori breaks a deeply held community rule.
Yeah. I mean, that'll at least make us remember everything.
Totally.
Because we didn't even discuss Arondir yet.
I was just going to say, we didn't get to discuss Arondir and Bronwyn. This is another, we kind of set the table for the meal with P.S. these two like each other.
Right. Yeah.
And I would have loved to have seen why they like each other. It felt like, oh no, they're together, they're into each other. And then like 5 episodes later, we got a justification of him being like, because you're the person that's the nicest or something like that. And I was like, but it would have been nice to have them be like, I don't know, on friendly terms and then take a couple episodes to get to the point where you're like, oh, but like there's love there. Like that would have been nice to see develop. Yeah. Again, I understand they had a whole lot of table to set up in my setting the table analogy that I'm doing here. They had a whole lot of table to set, but it would have been nice to see that, which I think I am in the minority on that opinion because so many people felt like season 1 was so slow. So me saying, slow it down more. I want to see this. Well, I get that could be unpopular.
And you had the luxury of being able to see it on the big screen, right?
Yeah.
It
was gorgeous on the big screen.
Yeah, and what did the first age? What did Valinor look like to you when they showed the 2 trees at the very beginning?
It was absolutely stunning. Like we've said, every kind of visual that they've put forth in Rings of Power has been amazing. It's been really, really lovely to see the golden leaves of Linden, and like I said, to see Khazad-dûm and to see Valinor. All of that brought to life on screen has been absolutely stunning, and I'm really grateful that we as Tolkien fans got that. Which is why, when I say overall, when I look at the series, I enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see more of the series. Those are some of the reasons why. But yeah, I mean, Arondir, I would love to see him and Bronwyn, like why that relationship matters, because right now I think I'm not invested in their relationship. and I want to be invested in the relationship. I love the actor who plays Arondir. I'm a big fight choreo nerd, and I love that that actor is he knows several different types of martial arts and combined them own in his way to make a very unique fight style for the elves. I flippin' appreciate and love that to high heaven. I love him as an actor, and I think that is making me more invested in his storyline. But we've gotten to see him go through quite a bit now, from getting captured to trying to escape unsuccessfully to then, you know, eventually making that escape, and why he stays behind when the other elves are called back to Gil-galad, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's fascinating.
Yeah. And now he's going with the Southlanders to their new settlement.
Right.
And so that'll be interesting, because Tolkien only wrote about, I believe, 2 successful relationships that happened between man and elf, right? So the big famous one is Luthien and Beren, and then much later it's Aragorn and Arwen. But the idea that every other supposed or attempted at there being a relationship between a human and an elf has ended in failure or catastrophe or tragedy.
Ooh.
Is that because, remember, his buddy tells him that in like episode 1 or 2. His buddy kind of warns
he's
him.
like, don't do it.
Yeah. So are they foretelling now to us that there could be tragedy with this?
Maybe. And that would lead into your theory of, you know, where those folks are going story-wise as well. Red Banshee says, it can be said that perhaps they tried to bite off more than they can chew in this first season, introducing too many characters. But I mean, they do have a lot to go through, and they knew they were telling this entire epic tale in 5 seasons. So
yeah.
I don't know. But okay, so that's A Shadow of the Past. We had a lot of discussion about Meteor Man, which is what we originally called the Stranger. You know, we speculated to high heaven. Why would, if it was Sauron, because a lot of people at the time thought maybe the Stranger was Sauron, why would he arrive on a meteor? Like what could be, you know, the story of that. And
you could argue that the 3 wanderers that were following him, that they were believing the fan theories online because they thought he was Sauron too.
They did. That's true.
Maybe they were spending too much time on Twitter.
I want to know more about those. Are they priests? What are they? Well, I want to know more about those characters. Now they are, but like they obviously come from an order. I would guess they come from an order of people that are like them and believe the same things. I'd love to know more about
They're
them.
Shapeshifters. For sure. I mean, we saw it on screen.
Yep.
So were those the 3 wolves that were tracking the Harfoots earlier in the episodes? They
very well could have been, and I like that theory a lot too. All right. Anything else from the first episode that you feel like?
I mean, I loved showing the Battle of Unnumbered Tears.
Yep.
And I loved all the First Age stuff that they were allowed to show us, and they weren't allowed to show us a lot. Because once again, that was a thing where they called up the Tolkien Enterprises or Tolkien estate and said, "Can we show this piece?" And they had to get permission for piece by piece, name by name of what they could get permission to. So for what they got, I'm cool with it. And we even saw Morgoth for like a second. We saw his shadow come up.
Awesome
in the sky. So I dug it.
It was awesome. I dug it too. Just being able to see a lot of these places conceptualized on screen for the first time, I thought was very overwhelming in a lovely way. All right, so Season 1, Episode 2, Adrift. Galadriel finds a new ally. Elrond faces a cold reception from an old friend. Nori endeavors to help a stranger. Arondir searches for answers while Bronwyn warns her people of a threat. I mean, I know some of this we've already kind of rehashed, but Elrond and Galadriel's relationship we haven't really talked about. And I would have loved to have seen just like a little snippet in a flashback or anything of their friendship.
Right.
Because we see it automatically start cold, and we just have to, you know, accept that there was a friendship there before that.
And, you know, a lot of people pointed out it would have been really cool to see Elrond go to Numenor, because it was Elrond's brother that founded Numenor. Elrond and his brother Elros were one of those pairings where they were actually they were called half elven, but they were actually 3/4 elf.
Okay.
But they were allowed to choose whether they were going to be mortal or immortal. Mm-hmm. And Elrond said, I'm going to be an elf. And Elros said, I'm going to be a human. He got to live for a really long time, but he founded Numenor.
Right.
So sending Galadriel there was cool, but it would have been even cooler to send Elrond there.
And yeah, I mean, Nori is just a sweet Harfoot that just wants to help this stranger. Mm-hmm. You know, with throwing...
It's against the rules.
We've already established that Nori throws caution to the wind and curiosity wins out. Which is so interesting because it's kind of the opposite of what we know about hobbits in the Third Age, where they're much more comfortable the way things are.
Yep. No adventures.
Curiosity makes you late for dinner.
Yeah.
Don't do any of that.
Yeah.
Except for, you know, the little bit of the tookish roguishness that we see in that family. But it's kind of funny that, well, I guess you could say the rest of the Harfoots are very like, no, we stick to what we normally do. But
right.
Nori is the one that throws caution to the
Nobody
wind.
goes alone. Nobody goes off trail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nobody's left behind. Although it's interesting that they always say nobody's left behind.
But
I'm
they
like,
leave
y'all
everybody
leave
behind.
everybody behind.
Like,
though.
oh, you broke your foot? You're screwed.
You're out.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of do. All right, so let's see. And Galadriel finds a new ally. I assume this is when she first meets Halbrand.
Right. This is when they're on the water, and the sea dragon.
Oh, the sea dragon was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was into that. The sea dragon was cool.
Although we don't know why the sea dragon left. Once again, is this all just Halbrand, a.k.a. Sauron? Was this something he created a la a holodeck? Sorry to cross the streams, but like, was he projecting all of this?
All right, episode 3, Adar. Arondir finds himself a captive. Galadriel and Halbrand explore a legendary kingdom. Elendil is given a new assignment, and Nori faces the consequences. I loved... This was the episode where we saw Numenor for the first time, I believe, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great.
And it's funny that they called this episode Adar because you never see Adar.
No,
it's
don't we only see like his shadow or his hand or
and then
something?
the episode ends.
Right.
So you actually see him in the 4th episode.
Yeah.
But, Numenor was great. Although I will say... and I know that they were filming this during the height of COVID.
They were.
And my one gripe overall for any of these great cities that they're showing us, they do these sweeping shots over these cities, and I feel like I never see any people in them. Like, I want to see, like, little people moving around or something, and I just don't.
And that could definitely be a pandemic restriction thing.
But, I mean, maybe they could, like, CGI some people or something, you know, I don't know.
Only if it looks okay. I'm always hesitant to suggest more CGI in anything.
Okay.
Practical effects for the win. But no, when CGI is done very well, and when it's paired with practical effects, it can be, you know, to great success for sure. But I get what you're saying. You want the world to feel lived in.
Yeah.
As less of a set piece. And
Right,
more of a
right. Yeah.
living, breathing
And
location.
that was parts of Numenor I felt did look very lived in, and then other parts I felt a little sort of like I was watching the remake of Aladdin when they were like in the palace of in Jasmine's palace. I was like, this feels a little Disney to me, but the outside sets were incredible. So once again, I'm sure that they're gonna fine tune that and get that.
Also, this was the episode where Halbrand, I think, is working his buns off to join the Blacksmith Guild. Right. And I remember thinking at the time that was strange. But now, knowing what we know now, those pieces all start to make sense.
Right. So perhaps as Sauron, as Halbrand, he wanted to join the Blacksmiths Guild to try to influence them in what he eventually did with Celebrimbor.
Yep. Mr. New York Tacali says this is where we learned what fast travel, where walks from Eregion to Khazad-dûm were instant. It's true.
Oh, right.
The quick like teleportation
the dot
seemingly.
on the map, and then Celebrimbor's still wearing his weird robe thing.
They just, like we said, they got a lot of ground to cover, both literally and figuratively.
It would have been nice to show them maybe like in a cart for a second with some guards. And then they just walked around the corner, but their cart and their guards are right there. Would have
been good.
Yeah.
Thorid says, was Halbrand meeting Galadriel and then getting to Numenor deliberate or opportunistic?
I want to think now that because we know he's Sauron, that it was all deliberate, but show us that later during the reveal. I don't know. Maybe him showing them on the raft is a reveal that he coordinated this the entire time.
I thought all of that was happening in her head, and he was like in her head.
No, it was. But I mean, maybe in her head, he shows her, hey, look, I've just recreated this, because guess what? I created it the first time.
He has his, like, evil villain monologue moment in her head of how he planned the whole thing. I don't know. But that moment did work really well for me. And I love that it all happened in her head, because then she had the responsibility of telling everybody else. And, like, you know, us as the audience is, well, how's she going to let them all know, and did Elrond already figure it out, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Which I'm glad that he already figured it out, and I'm a little bummed that she wasn't caught on to it sooner.
Right.
Because they were establishing Galadriel as this, you know, very powerful captain, really, really wise, like, already, and I kind of felt like it undermined her power a little bit to have her be so, like, what? Pulled out from under her.
Yeah.
Maybe, and again, that's probably just me being nitpicky, but...
And depending on how they measured time in the time of the trees, which is technically before the First Age, Galadriel here is somewhere between 6,000 and 24,000 years old.
Right.
At the beginning, at what we're seeing her right now. So the young Galadriel, it doesn't... I feel like even if she was only 6,000 years old, she probably would have worked through some of this stuff beforehand. And would be more wise. But...
And Mr. New York to Cali, maybe I need to rewatch that then, because Mr. New York to Cali said they did show Halbrand breaking the raft off from his traveling companions versus just him and Galadriel. So maybe I'll have to go back and watch that reveal again if they showed that in the final episode when he does his reveal.
Yeah, because I thought that they just died from the sea dragon or something. Because all of a sudden it was just them.
If he was in cahoots with or somehow controlling the sea dragon, having the sea dragon, you know, chop it right in the middle to get rid of all the extraneous people could have been part of the plan.
Were those other raft companions, did they even exist? Or were they part of his illusion?
Oh, that's interesting. Can he create other people like that?
I mean, if he's a sorcerer, as they say, who knows?
Fantasy, maybe.
Because magic.
Because magic. Because magic and fantasy. All right, the Great Wave. Oh, we haven't talked about Queen Regent Muriel yet, so this is perfect. Queen Regent Muriel's faith is tested. Isildur finds himself at a crossroads. Elrond uncovers a secret. Arondir is given an ultimatum, and Theo disobeys Bronwyn. Now, I do feel like we're getting to see the journey early on for Isildur and for Theo, which we know are going to be major players. Well, maybe not for Theo, but we know Isildur for sure is like one of the major players moving through these 5 seasons. So I love that we're getting to see him at the early, like, I don't really like my training. I know my dad wants me to do it. You know, I like that we're getting to see him go through this journey. That's what I'm hungry for, and kind of from everybody.
And that episode is the episode that opens with, as it's called, the Great Wave, her vision of the destruction of Numenor.
I love Muriel so far. I don't know how you feel about Queen
great.
Regent Muriel, but I love her performance. I love kind of the surprise they gave her and a couple episodes from now after the volcanic explosion, because that's not something that's written about or told about. So it's you know, that was a fun surprise for all of us. What does her dad warn her before she goes that going there is going to be nothing but darkness? And it's so literal. It ends up being so literal. I thought that was a nice storytelling play. But yeah, I love her character. I love how strong she is, and I love how we're seeing her make the choices she's making on behalf of her people.
And, you know, we're learning more about Elendil. And it's interesting how the show portrayed Elendil as someone that Muriel didn't know, because they're actually third cousins. Although I guess I don't know all my third cousins that well.
I don't know all my third cousins,
but
for
I
sure.
would feel like if she did an inquiry because she asked about him, I feel like they would have been, well, actually, Queen, he's your third cousin. Like, you know what I mean? If she's getting a report on him, you know.
Thorade says, what's up with Isildur's sister?
Right.
I also have that question.
Yeah.
What is up with Isildur's sister?
I
Is
don't
she
know.
just there to, like, help aid in the storytelling for other more important storylines, or is she herself going to have an important role to play in this?
Is she going to become a ring wraith? Who knows?
Who knows?
I think she's going to die in the Numenor's destruction, personally. It feels like... So there's the Kingsmen and the Faithful. And the Kingsmen is a little bit confusing because the current king is faithful. Is she going to... But the Kingsmen were people that are sort of loyal to Numenor and want to turn their back on their relationship with the elves.
Right.
Whereas the Faithful know that their relationship with the elves is paramount to keeping Numenor alive.
Yes.
So I think what it appears to be, she maybe has a little bit of a romance with Pharazôn's son, but not sure. They seem to be kind of flirting with each other. I don't know. But what will happen? Will she try to convince Pharazôn that if they don't stick to the ways of the faithful, that the island will be destroyed? Or will she fall under that trap? Because there's a lot, not to reveal too much, but I mean, clearly they're setting up, there's going to be a power play. Pharazôn's going to make a move at some point.
Yes. I would agree. I think they're totally setting that up. And I'm excited to see where it goes, honestly. I think Pharazôn's a really interesting character, and where they leave off with him is really interesting.
And I think the actor does a great job, too. There was great casting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing about the show, too, is I would say the casting is
overall, I'm really thrilled with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, overall, I'm really thrilled with it. Mr. New York to Cali says it was interesting that they made the Numenorians more human-like than elf and less warrior/tech advanced like were in the books. And here's where I'll defer to you, Jason, because I don't have a specific recollection of that, but you may.
Numenorians are supposed to be superhumans. Their lifespan is several hundred years, and they're taller and bigger than the Middle Earth humans, which is interesting. Now, back to casting, but also you could shoot this. Remember how they kept calling Halbrand Low Man? Even though he's like a foot taller than them? They cast Halbrand very tall. They kept calling him Low Man because Numenorians were supposed to be towering taller than regular humans. In the book, Elendil's 7'10".
Wow. Yeah. Oh, I wish that we would have seen that visually.
Yeah.
They could have
put some people on apple boxes.
I do feel like if you compare the Numenorians to like Bronwyn's crew of Southlanders, it almost looks like that differentiation there is just one of power and success and wealth.
Right.
More so than actual,
in the books it was actual size because Elros was part elf. And, everyone from his line then had some elf blood in them. And elves in Tolkien's world are taller than humans.
But I do feel like Rings of Power in general probably spent a lot of time on, but I don't know that they absolutely nailed it consistently, the different interplay between the heights and the sizes.
Right.
There were some shots where I thought it was very clear that Nori was way smaller than the stranger, and some shots where, like, when both hands are on the apple, that the hands were probably a little too close in scale. Or, like, some of the scenes between Durin and Elrond. Some of them looked really epic of a height difference, and some of them...
Like when they're on the elevator.
Right, and some of them were, maybe the perspective could have been a little different. I'm not an expert in that kind of stuff. I thought it was something they did very successfully in the Peter Jackson films, but I feel like Rings of Power struggled with it a bit at times.
Well, I think some of that has to do with the fact that, yes, there were showrunners that were running the whole show, but there were different directors for each episode.
That's true.
And so a lot of that is up to the director to decide how to do that. So that could have, having different directors.
Yes, and so maybe just the sheer complexity of trying to have the Numenorians be so much taller than the other humans that we see in the series. Maybe that played into it. Yeah. I don't know. Just speculating. But yes, the Muriel's premonition of the Great Wave was, I thought, a really cool way to kind of introduce kind of introduce her storyline and where it's going. I thought it was really, really smart. All right, season 1, episode 5, Nori questions her instincts. Elrond struggles to stay true to his oath. Halbrand weighs his destiny, and the Southlanders brace for attack. Now, this is where I feel like a lot of people who maybe weren't so sold on the series started, like, the more we had battles, the more people were into it. So really episode 6 more than episode 5. Episode 5 was kind of like set up for 6.
Yeah.
And then episode 6, everybody was like, okay, I'm in.
Here we go.
I'm in, baby. And in fact, we're looking on IMDb right now at the episode ratings, and episode 6, I think, might be the highest rated.
Yeah.
Episode 6 is the highest rated episode of the series, because I think people were really, really down for that medieval battle. Much to the point of, calling it Battle of Five Armies instead of There and Back Again. People are down for that,
people
generally.
want the battles.
Now, I think there are times, like towards the end of Game of Thrones as a fantasy series, where it probably the amount of battles we saw on screen probably detracted a little bit from some of those more intimate storytelling moments.
Right.
And finding that balance is a very hard job. I'm not going to pretend I have the answer to it.
Now, I will say, though, episode 5 had the single most cringeworthy scene for me. I mean, we're being honest here.
Okay, what was it? Yeah, what was it?
So episode 5 had the scene where Galadriel is like, let me show your soldiers how to fight an orc. First of all...
I told you I'm a big fight choreo nerd, so that scene was rough for me.
Right, and it was rough for you. Okay, good. I was like, I hope we agree here.
Me.
Because not even the execution of the scene, but also, look, as fans of fantasy, how many frigging times have we seen the training for battle scene, right? Like, we don't need any more of those in our lives. But beyond that, it's like, it just felt so forced. Like, there was something about it, like, if someone can hit me, they'll get a promotion. And it's like, yeah, but if they hit you, they're also going to probably kill you. And so just the whole, that scene, just, I wish that they had just thrown that scene.
Well, and I want a cool demo of elven fighting, but I want it because they're forced into a situation where they have to fight. Not just like, let's have a little performance now.
Yeah. That was very cringeworthy to me.
I just, a lot of, and again, here, I'm like willing to put up with the like, let's have a fight scene just to have a fight scene. If the fight choreo is super cool.
Yeah.
But it was just okay.
And I'm like, if we're
slow-mo. Yeah, it was like weird slow-mo kind of dancing. And I have no problem with elven fighting looking like a dance. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But I don't know. Give me a little more like Muay Thai kind of, like I want to see the stuff that Aaron Deere was showing us.
Dunk Chunk wrote, let me show you how to fight an orc. Stab him. End of lesson. Yeah, that was pretty much it.
Dunk Chunk said the reason that you liked episode 6 had less to do with the battle. For you liked that it focused on one thing and jumped around a lot less, which is very true as well. Yeah. And I can 100% see that because we are jumping around so much, and that does definitely aid in we don't have as much time to really feel invested in each individual storyline because we're just kind of so busy keeping up with and what's happening there again and what's happening there again. And that's, again, when I say, like, season 1 is kind of setting the table. Mm-hmm. So I hope in future seasons we'll have a little less of that now that the table's been set and more time to focus on one thing. Like you said, Dunk Chunk. We'll see. Episode 7 and Episode 8. So Episode 7, The Eye. Survivors of a cataclysm try to find safety. We've discussed how it's a bit strange that anyone survives this cataclysm, but fantasy. The Harfoots confront evil. Which was interesting to see them confront evil for the first time, for sure. Durin is torn between friendship and duty, and Adar considers a new name. And then episode 8, season 1 finale, new alliances are forged.
Yeah.
Doesn't give us much, so I figured I would just lump those together for now.
And then I'm not sure what episode they introduced what I like to call Mithril Chlorians. But the whole idea that that Mithril will save the elves, that's what happens in episode 7. I'm not...
That was a very strange choice.
Yeah. The internet was mad at that, as I think I kind of was too.
Yeah, that's a strange choice. I would have loved to have seen that told a different way, but if that's the story that they want to tell...
Yeah. Once again, could that be one of Sauron's lies, though? Is that something that he whispered?
I don't know.
So that... Hopefully that's still something that's,
Yeah, I was hoping that Mithril was, foretold to save the elves just because it's such an epic upgrade in battle armor that with it, they stand a chance against Sauron's forces.
Right.
And Thorin says, not just Mithril, but a single tiny nugget of Mithril. Right. Like, I was like, I thought they were calling on Durin to share the Mithril in the mine so that they could make armor for the elven armies, and that was going to give them the advantage and make sure that the elves were not, didn't go extinct purely based from the epic battle that they're about to have. But
instead,
no, they
like
definitely forecasted that it was like this tiny nugget of Mithril will save the elven race.
Yeah, and he got the nuggets, so I guess they're okay. They made the rings.
They made the rings. Mr. New York to Cali says, I have too many thoughts on the tree. The elf Balrog fight, and how the tree leaf awakens the shiny third age Balrog. I liked seeing the Balrog.
The Balrog was cool.
I liked seeing the Balrog.
Was very close to the Peter Jackson Balrog, I thought.
Yes,
Super
I wondered
close.
if they got rights specifically to showcase that Balrog, because it looked very close. But yeah, Dunk Chunk says Frodo's Mithril shirt could save the entire elven race.
Right, if you went by that, so...
Right, like I just always thought of, as someone who plays a lot of tabletop RPGs, I just thought always of Mithril as like some kind of magical armor that protects from piercing damage, like the ultimate protection from piercing damage, right?
Yeah.
And in that would be a huge advantage to whichever side had that type of armor for sure. But yeah, it's interesting, and maybe they'll give us more on that as we go further into the series. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, seeing the Balrog was cool, and a couple hints at, kind of some of these choices of are characters who think they're doing the right thing, are they actually doing the right thing in, like, Durin the Fourth, wanting to help his friend, is he then going to dig too deep, unleash the Balrog, which is what Durin the Third is warning about, so which is the right choice, right? And we're seeing a lot of people trying to make the choice that they think is best for their people, and it may not be the best choice overall, which I do think it leads back into that conversation about the clear good versus the clear evil, and not so much moral gray, because that's not really evil corrupting them. That's them having to make tough choices where they are doing what they think is the path of the light, but it might come back to bite them in the arse.
Yeah. At STS2884 said, I want to see more magical creatures. I heard Sauron had werewolves and vampires in his army. So Sauron lived on an island called the Isle of Werewolves. And I think when they showed Finrod, he had those huge giant claws.
So people are like, oh, they didn't do Finrod's death the way that it's told in the lore. And I'm like, maybe they did, because they just very vaguely said...
they didn't have the rights to show the whole scene.
And they also very vaguely said that, like, due to the fact that he got too close to Sauron, he died. But they didn't specifically say he wasn't killed by a werewolf.
Right. I don't think, because that whole story is in the Silmarillion,
right?
Which they don't have the rights to. So, I think they did the best they could.
The scratch was our...
And vampires in Tolkien's world are not your typical Count Dracula or Strahd von Zarovich that we're thinking of. They're actually these sort of winged creatures that look like a cross between a human and a bat. So they're as if you might imagine a vampire stuck between mid-transformation between a human and a bat. That's what Tolkien's vampires look like.
These are people's concept sketches.
Yeah.
That's just like a doodle.
Yeah, like on a...
That's cool.
On some notepad paper. I love it. They did a good job.
Okay, so Alcatron.com. This is on Pinterest. Thank you for posting this. But that's pretty cool looking. But yeah, and I mean, and then that leads us to the end of season 1, right? So it's the Harfoot storyline for me is all set up for the Stranger and what the Stranger will be.
And now, are we just going to see Nori and the Stranger in season 2? And it kind of feels that way.
It kind of feels that way. It kind of feels like Bilbo and Frodo leaving the Shire. Although they were able to bring friends with them, so we had a little bit of that interplay between the hobbits of the series, where this just seems like we're just getting Nori and the Stranger.
Yeah, because Poppy
doesn't go.
Yeah, and she's going to be the new trail finder.
The new Sadok,
for the Harfoots. So
yeah. So we'll see. So that's where we leave the Harfoots. But I feel like our major players after season 1, like the major storylines, and correct me if I'm wrong, are the Stranger and Nori. We're following Galadriel, now that she's on this quest to find out where Halbrand went, how that happened.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with the 3 rings that were forged? Right. We don't know.
Who's going to get those? I mean, we know in the books, but who knows?
Now, we know, as people that follow the greater storylines, that Isildur is going to play into our future and probably have a big part to do in the next season, upcoming. And maybe Halbrand and Isildur will cross paths.
And I'm also 100% certain, just because of what they established, that Isildur's horse is going to rescue him. I mean, it's going to happen.
It could.
It's going to happen.
It could. We're also looking to see what happens in Numenor next, because I feel like the politics upon return to Numenor are going to be...
Will Pharazôn say, hey, your queen's blind, can she really rule? I don't think so. Maybe I should rule.
Maybe.
I think that's what's going to
happen. I think we're going to have a political struggle in Numenor for sure. If it's over who rules, if it's over whether or not we're helping out anyone over in Middle Earth at all, or if we're just going to stay on our island and be very isolationist, and a struggle over what is best for Numenor, which I feel like is going to be hard, because we want them to get involved and help Galadriel in her quest, but we know ultimately that
leads to some
bad stuff for the Numenorians. So there's that struggle. And I guess who else are we watching? We're watching Bronwyn and her folk, Bronwyn and Theo, and Arondir's with them.
Yeah, what's going to happen with that?
And as far as the Linden elves go, I mean, obviously we're going to be following Elrond through something, although I don't know how he's going to play next in the majors, him and Gil-galad.
They have revealed already that we are going to see Círdan the Shipwright, who is he runs the Grey Havens, where the elves take the ships to Valinor, and he is a huge part of the War of the Ring. So, and someone earlier asked, and I don't know if you're still watching or not, they said, will this show lead up to Fellowship of the Ring? And what it will do is, they said it's going to lead up to that prologue we see in Fellowship of the Ring. So Fellowship of the Ring takes place in I can't recall off the top of my head, but the year 3000 of the Third Age, whereas Gondor is formed at the very beginning of the Third Age, but that's where all the stuff that you see in the prologue of Fellowship of the Ring leads up to. So that's what we're getting up to, that final last alliance between men and elves, as they call it.
Yeah, leading up to that. So that, in the beginning of Fellowship, that's a flashback, and that flashback is where we're going to end the Rings of Power story, or at least from what we've been told so far. And then as far as the future of Khazad-dûm, and the struggle between Durin the Third and Durin the Fourth, what's going to happen with the Mithril, what's going to happen with the Balrog, and I mean, in the Second Age, will we see also the fall of Khazad-dûm? In this series?
I think we will.
Rise and fall?
Hopefully not in season 2.
Hopefully not in season 2, but yes. So, I mean, that's where we are after the season. So, I know we kind of gave our overall thoughts in the beginning, but just to kind of TLDR it, now that we've gone at a more granular level through this, there is a lot that I loved about Rings of Power Season 1. There is a lot that I, just as a fan and as a Tolkien enthusiast, questioned some of the choices and thought, I kind of wish they had told that differently. But I'm trying to leave the door open, as this is part 1 of a 5-part story. And we know that.
Right.
So do I think that part 1, if they said from here on in we're never getting seasons 2 through 5, do I think that part 1 would stand up on my shelf with favorite Tolkien adaptations of all time? Probably not.
No.
But am I willing to say that the whole seasons 1 through 5 might not be there eventually? No, absolutely not. I liked where we started, but it's a beginning. That's for me.
Yeah. Like I said at the beginning, and I tell people that ask me about it, I said I wanted to love it, but I ended up liking it. And there are a lot of things about it that I do love. By the way, speaking of putting something up on your shelf, can't wait for that merch to come out.
Cannot wait.
I want me a hammer. I'm going to buy 2 hammers of Fëanor so that I can just have one on the shelf and then use the other one around the house.
The Hammer of Fëanor is definitely, as soon as I saw it, my husband like grabbed my arm because he knew. He just knew.
He's like,
I was going to be like, and we're getting that prop replica. Yeah. As soon as we can get that, who's on it? Is it New Line Cinema? Is it Weta? Who is it that will make that for me?
Yeah, we'll find out.
That's a whole
That's the whole behind the scenes rights thing. I think we were talking about that on the podcast at one time too. That like, one company owns the rights to merch, and Amazon doesn't own the rights to merch, so they have to agree that they're going to put the merch out. So it's a whole thing. Because you would think that all that merch would be available now. You know?
If they could.
Yeah, but
because now is the hype for it. But the Hammer of Fëanor.
Probably the
Finrod's dagger.
Yeah, that thing.
Finrod's
so cool.
dagger was gorgeous. The 3 elven rings.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. Mr. New York Tecali is anticipating the fall of Khazad-dûm in season 3. Season 4 will be the fall of Numenor, and season 5 being the fallout leading to the rest of the Rings lore. That's interesting. That could totally be how they play it out. If they do 2 years between each season, the 5th season will help me celebrate my retirement.
You and me both. Fake photo.
2 years is so long to wait.
I know. It's too long.
It's so long to wait. So I will be, waiting with bated breath for season 2 to find out where this story goes from here. And as I approach a lot of things that are adaptations surrounding fandoms that I love, I approach with cautious optimism. I always want to love it. But I try not to set the expectation bar so high that I am disappointed. So it's I want to love it, and I'm excited for it.
There were many moments in this show that we both loved, and were riveted to.
And we're like texting each other about. Yeah.
Who knows? Hopefully they will be able to speed up the production process. COVID, slowed down a lot of that. And I know that we are going to have to wait about 2 years till the next season, but maybe the 3rd season, it'll be a year.
Maybe. And as much as I was sad-faced about them announcing that they're going to be filming a lot of season 2 in the UK and not in New Zealand, because New Zealand will forever be Middle-earth to me, maybe that means that they can film, get through production a little bit quicker or a little bit easier.
And they have also announced that they are still filming some things in New Zealand. So that came out too. So the bulk of it is in England, but there will be some stuff in New Zealand too.
Yes. Jung Chunk says, just holding on hope that maybe the stranger is a blue wizard and not Gandalf. I mean,
so are we.
So are we. I'm not holding my breath on that one, though. Not at this point. Rings of Power! Dun 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 dun! Jason Charles Miller, thank you so much for coming on my stream today to discuss this.
Absolutely. Anytime.
And thank you all so much for joining us for that. It's been lovely. And I know that Fate Photo said in chat, great show. So until next time, choose love. And remember, you're not alone, and it's okay not to be okay. And I will follow that lovely message up with whatever you decide to do with the rest of your evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, be kind to one another, and we'll see you soon.